Well, hey friends, Pastor Mark here. You're kind of getting me after Sunday morning, coming back from church and preaching at church today. So this isn't my usually garage clothes that I have on, but I thought I'd kind of give you an update and a kind of introduction to this week's episode of Revs Racers to see what's going on. So this week I've been working on the carbs. My jet kit came from Six Sigma jet company, I guess. You can go to sixsigma.com and I'll put a little link, I think, down in the comment section if you want to check it out. But it's a pretty slick place. You can give them the name and make and year of your motorcycle and what kind of modifications you have to it, whether you're using pod filters or have a custom exhaust on it, things like that. And they'll actually send you jets that you can put inside your carburetor to make them run for whatever application you've got. So I sent away for a specific kit for my Suzuki GSX1100, and they sent me the pilot jets and main jets that I needed to swap out inside these carburetors to make them work. So for those of you that maybe are new to motorcycle mechanics, or maybe it's the first time you've worked with carburetors, the first thing I'll say is these can be really intimidating to look at. These carburetors, there's all kinds of tubes and wires and little passageways and moving parts and screws that you can move back and forth. And I know when I first decided that I was going to tear into a bunch of these carburetors, I was super intimidated of what if I, move a screw a half a turn farther than it's supposed to? Is the bike not going to run? Is it going to take me ages to get everything dialed back in the way it's supposed to be? And so it was really intimidating, and I was just terrified. And for a long time, I just didn't want to mess with the carburetors and just rode motorcycles that kind of ran like crap because I was afraid to adjust these carburetors. But basically what these carburetors do is they're kind of a little box that sits on the intake portion of your motorcycle, and as the piston inside the motorcycle engine moves down, when that piston moves down, it creates a vacuum that sucks air into the engine. And as it sucks air into the engine, that air moves through these little carburetors through a series of tubes, and as it moves through, it grabs the fuel through a series of little nozzles, for lack of a better word, and as that air sucks through these carburetors, it picks up the fuel along with it at a precise measurement, which those little jets create, and go into the combustion chamber. And that's where, when the mixture is right and the spark happens, you get an explosion, and that's what makes the motorcycle run, makes it turn. And so, you want to get the optimum mixture of fuel and air and spark at the precise moment for it to make the most power. And so that's kind of the combination. It's really almost, however new your motorcycle is or however old your motorcycle is, the combination of air, fuel, and spark are what make your motorcycle run, whether it goes through a carburetor or whether it's a fuel injected system where there's actually a system where a precise amount of fuel is squirted into the cylinder at a precise time and at a precise amount, and then it ignites at a precise moment. Either way, it's still a mixture of fuel, air, and spark, right? So this just regulates air, fuel, and spark. Now, when you put, say, a pod filter like I have here on these, that changes the amount of air that is getting sucked through these carburetors. And so usually pod filters allow more air than your original air box does. And so with that being said, when you have more air going through, it means that those jets inside the carburetor that have holes, that precise amounts to let a precise amount of fuel through, it means that the mixture ratio of air to fuel is off. And so what is most often the correction for that, if you want to run pod filters like this, is that you change the jets inside your carburetor to either be bigger or smaller, depending on whether you have more or less air going through. So basically that's what it is, and it's really not that difficult. There's two jets that are in the bottom of these, and you'll see that in just a moment when I show you that video that's coming up. But years ago, I had a project I was working on, an old CB650 Nighthawk, which was kind of one of the more difficult projects I did. But I put pod filters on it and it just never ran right. And, I was thinking that the idea of that, the secret ratio, right, is always air, fuel, and spark. And when I put the pod filters on it, I realized that I had modified the amount of air that was going through. And I got to thinking, well, usually the way we correct that is we crack open these carburetors and we spill fuel all over the place, and we unscrew things and we get it all put back together with different size jets, and you kind of run it and test it. And if it doesn't work, then you go to the next size bigger and you have to tear it all apart and put new jets in it and stuff. And I was thinking, well, if the ratio is just the right amount of air to the amount of fuel, rather than cracking these open and putting new jets in it, what if I just limited the amount of air that was going through those pod filters? And so I went to my local motorcycle shop and I got some air filter foam, and I just stuffed those pod filters full of foam as a way of kind of limiting the amount of air that was getting sucked through them. And actually it worked quite well. The bike ran much better, but what I found out very quickly was that the air that's getting sucked through those carburetors when that piston pulls down actually has quite a bit of force to it, and it's quite a bit of air. And what happened was it basically sucked the foam right out of those pod filters and sucked them into the carburetor, which then kept all the valves open and everything open and made a mess, and didn't run right. And so, I kind of quit after that. I probably could have glued them inside the pod filters if I wanted to really explore it more. But maybe someday in a project I'll create pod filters with adjustable airflow through them to see if that maybe makes it easier than having to crack the carburetors open and rejet them. But basically that just says that the ratio that you really want to be concerned with, especially when it comes to carburetors, is the amount of air, the amount of fuel, and the amount of spark, and when that spark ignites the fuel. So that's what I've done this week. I've got those new jets. I did it the old-fashioned way. I didn't mess with the pods. I just went ahead and cracked them open and put a new pilot and a pilot jet and main jet in these, and you'll see those in just a moment when I open them up. But so that's kind of where I've been this week with this project, and so you can take a look at what the inside of these carbs look like and how they function there. The other thing that I'll mention as well, I didn't mess too much with these, but on the bottom of these carburetors here is a float bowl, and this is where the fuel that comes from your fuel tank kind of collects in these little bowls down here in the bottom. And one of my concerns was that there was a lot of rust in there because there was a lot of rust in my fuel tank. But there's a little plastic float, kind of two hard plastic balloons inside each one of these floats that are hooked to a piece of metal, and they float up and down depending on how much fuel is in that little bowl, and they have a little tang on them that opens a valve or closes a valve. And so when it's at a certain amount of fuel, it opens it, and when it drops below that, it closes it, so that you don't just have fuel flowing over everything. And it's a way to regulate the amount of fuel that goes through there. This bike was running pretty good before any changes that I had done to it. And since I'm making these changes, I'm kind of preemptively doing some correction for them. But I didn't mess with the float bowls because they were running pretty good, and I didn't have any fuel spilling out or anything like that. So I haven't messed with those, although sometimes when you start working with carbs, sometimes you've got to deal with the float bowls. The other thing I didn't really do much with is in the top of these, there's a diaphragm that has a little needle in it. And that needle fits into a hole, and as the needle pulls up with the vacuum of the engine, it increases the amount of air and fuel that can move through that hole. And so as the throttle opens more and as that needle pulls up more, it allows more fuel to get into the engine and have a more powerful combustion inside the engine. One of the ways that you can also adjust carburetors is by moving that needle up or down a little bit so that you get a bigger volume of air and fuel through that hole that the needle is plugging into or opening and letting fuel come out. As I said, these were working pretty good beforehand. And they're kind of a pain in the neck to get that needle and cylinder disengaged. But one of the things that the kit that I came with was some spacers that I could raise that needle up if it's running either too rich or too lean, if there's too much fuel or not enough fuel. One of the ways you can regulate that fuel is by the height of that needle that goes in and out of that little jet. And so what I'm going to do is I'll put these on and when I get the bike up and running again and kind of test it, if it's still running pretty rich, even with the jets that are there or running lean, I can then tackle those. It's pretty easy. Just the top of these come off and you can pull that diaphragm and needle out all in one piece, and you can take the needle out and adjust it up and down. So I might do that later if I need to, but I'm crossing my fingers that hopefully I won't need to do too much adjusting with that. But that's kind of the introduction to carburetors, everything you were afraid to ask, but were wanted to get explained in whatever, 10 minutes or so. I'll let you take a look at what the inside of these carburetors look like and what the jets look like and what I'm doing there. And then we'll just keep moving forward with this project. Thanks, friends. Well, so tearing into the carbs, I've got the bottom float bowl cover off of them here. You can see, and looking into it, you can see there's some rust that has made its way into that bowl from the fuel tank. Obviously, you can kind of see it in there. There's been no fuel in these carbs for a couple of weeks now, so it's kind of dried in, and there's kind of orange rust powder in there. So I'll clean that all up. And you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see right there, around the gasket also there's some rust that's gone through there. And so I'll pull that gasket out and get that all cleaned up. So you're looking right down now at the main jet, and I've got a jet kit here from Six Sigma Racing, specifically designed for this. And in this jet kit that they have, because I'm running these pod filters that you can see on the carburetors, on this, the kit that they had sent me has pilot jets and main jets in it, and actually has two different sizes. A different size jet, a little bit larger on the outside of the engine, so the number 1 and number 4 over here. These jets are going to actually be a little bit bigger on the main jet than the two here on the center. And so I'll be pulling that main jet out and taking a look at it. The floats look like they're in pretty good shape right now. They don't seem to have any cracks or holes in it. Floats, they float like they're supposed to. The little spring right in here is doing what it's supposed to do, but I'll kind of pull that out and make sure that it's working like it's supposed to and all good and clean, and get it all cleaned out and get it looking good inside here so that there's no clogs in these little jets. And if I find any more in there, I might show you what a clogged jet looks like if I come across one. And basically what I'm just using is some good old gum out choke carb cleaner. It works pretty good. You have to be careful though when you're using it, because you can shoot little jets. If you have it on your fingers are slick, and then you shoot some of this stuff out of an aerosol can, it'll shoot that jet across the garage, and then you have to go find where you just shot the jet to. So be careful while you're doing that. But tearing into the carbs is what they look like so far. So here's the carburetor down in the float bowls there. So this right here, this is the main jet. That one on the outsides goes from the original 130 to a 132.5. So it's a brand new jet. Shouldn't have to be cleaned. It's all good. Down next to it is the pilot jet. I'll unscrew that. You can see there's a little notch on the top for a narrow head straight screwdriver, and we can put that out. And then I'll be replacing that with the pilot jets, which are size 50, and so we'll put those down in there, and hopefully that'll get it set up just right to run with these pod filters and to make it run good. After I pull those jets out, I'll squirt some cleaner down there, make sure the passageways for air to get through them and all that are good and clean. But after that, then we'll put it back up, seal it up, and then move to the next one and the next one and the next one, and hope that these carbs work the way that they're supposed to. So I need to let you know about a mistake that I made and a correction I had to make. It just happens every now and again because I'm stupid. But so the jets that came to me from Six Sigma Racing, I mentioned that there was two different size pilot jets. One was a little bit bigger than, I think one was 130 and the other was 132.5. I mistakenly said in my video here that the bigger jets went on the outside too, on carburetors number 1 and 4. in reality, they go on number 2 and 3 and the middle. And of course, I reread my instructions and saw that I'd put the bigger ones on the outside rather than the inside too. So I had to, nothing big, but just had to unscrew the bowls again and unscrew the jets out and swap them over to the original ones. So just to, in case you're looking at this and using this as a point of reference, I just wanted you to know that the larger jets were on the inside 2 carburetors, not the outside 2. The outside had 130 jets, and the 2 inside have 132.5 jets. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So here they are, all cleaned up and ready to go. The jets have been replaced and rejetted for pods, and hopefully they'll work like they're supposed to when I get them attached to the engine. I didn't show you, I mean, there's not a whole lot to see. You just basically unscrew the float bowls and the top where the diaphragm is, and shoot the carb cleaner through all the little channels and holes, and replace the jets like the manual tells you to, and then you kind of just screw it back together. So, you know, a lot of people get really intimidated because there's all kinds of screws and passageways and all kinds of stuff that you're afraid you'll mess up on these carburetors. But, you know, really they're not that difficult to work on, and replacing the jets is just a matter of taking a flathead screwdriver and screwing the jet out and putting the new one in. And so I've got a couple little, the float bowls there have a little drain plug in the bottom of them down here. And they've got little rubber washers around them to keep them from leaking. Some of those rubber washers were in pretty bad shape, so I'm going to head up to the hardware store and replace those. But other than that, the carbs looked in pretty good shape. There was some kind of powdery rust in the float bowls down there at the bottom, but nothing too bad. And none of the jets were really clogged. So I'm hoping that with the new jet put in the system, and the pod filters, it should run pretty good. So anyway, that job's done, and time to move on to the next one.